Welcome to part 4 of my face rig avatar creation tutorial. In this part and part 5, they're going to be combined to be the bulk of the rigging and animation portions of this tutorial. And here we go. So just something to note real quick, I just pulled up my system resource monitor. And this program already, just creating this framework, is now using 4 gigs of RAM. So this is a little bit of an intensive process. Weaker computers, you've been warned. But anyway, so we're going to start rigging this, and we're going to do this by creating these meshes using these tools up here. And they're called deformers. Now you can animate these meshes individually, but it does seem to be a much more taxing system on the RAM and everything to do that. So instead what we're actually going to do is we're going to frame everything in tiers of making these mesh deformers. And the outermost one, I like to select everything, create one, and we're going to call this the full body. And then in this is basically going to be how much you want to break up that deformer. So we've got 2x2 and 5x5, and you'll see that in a second. So I'm going to hit create, and now we've got this. So we have these 2 segments in between. That's where you can use these handles and everything. But ultimately the actual mesh is 5x5. And then you can use the centerpiece that moves the entire thing. But you can also use these to kind of distort everything. Now note that it doesn't move all the meshes quite evenly. So you're going to need to be careful to not overextend or stretch something outside the bounds of its own animated ability. Then from there, what I'm going to do is I'm going to hide the body and the chest floof. And we're going to select everything else. And we're going to make its own deformer. Actually, we're going to give this one a pivot. Or no, we're going to create a warp deformer on that. We're going to call this one the head. All right. So now down, where are we? I don't see it. Da, 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 da. Did it not create? All right, let's make this one the head again. Head. Great. Okay. There we go. Now I've got a mesh that is specific to the head. And as you note, as we select this outer one, we're still distorting it. And then if you go into the heads mesh, it's getting warped individually, independently of that outer one. So then we're going to go in and we're going to slowly create more and more of these meshes. Just kind of grouping things together for the most part. And I like to see how I want to do this. Kind of want the upper muzzle actually isn't going to get animated at all, really. So we're going to leave that alone, but we do need the mouth and the teeth and the head. That's all going to get blocked into the jawline. So we're going to call this one jaw. Great. Oh, and I actually did mess this one up just a little bit. I forgot I need to actually, I think we're fine. What we need to do is just on this piece right here, we need to create a mesh. We need to increase these divisions a little bit just because we need to be able to space it out throughout this jaw. So we're actually going to go by Let's go by let's go by 4x3. Vertically, we're not worried so much, but there we go. Now we can kind of compress and move the jaw. We can kind of get these down here. So as we close the mouth, we can kind of animate it a little bit. And then the rest of the mouth is going to move with it. So undo all this. So we've got that. And then we're going to create a few grouped meshes. Actually, you know what? I think we're probably fine for the most part. We're going to create individual meshes for the ears. Ooh, don't forget to name them. Right ear, and let's see which one that one is. That's the mouth or jaw. And here's the left ear. All right, so now we've got those. Hair is going to need one. And actually, this is where we're going to get interesting. Close that, cancel that. Because we're actually going to get the, go in here, we're going to select the hair, the front of the hair, and we're also going to have the back of the hair at the same time. And that's just going to keep them combined together for while we're animating. Hopefully it'll keep everything locked in. It may cause some issues, but we'll see how it goes. We're going to mesh that together. We're going to just call this one the hair in general. Create that. And then lastly, each of these eyelids is going to need their own. And I think we need like 4. I think I'm going to go 4x3 now. This is where my noobishness with this software really shines, because I could be overdoing this easily, and I really don't know. I don't know how much people typically actually use. So we're going to call this one the, actually we're going to shorthand it, right upper eyelid. And then we're going to go to this lower one, create another one, right lower eyelid. Go back in here, make it 4x3. Do this again, real quick to all of them. Okay, now we've got all those together, and I think that might be all the meshes that we're going to need. Now, one thing to note is, even if you forget something, you can still go back and correct it or add meshes and change adjustment layers and things like that, basically at any point. And that is one thing that I really like. Even if you go, you're in this eye and you see this mesh and everything, you're like, oh, you could be all the way done with animating and be like, man, I wish this had a little bit more resolution to this mesh. You can edit it at any time. That's one fantastic feature, but I'm guessing that's probably where a lot of that RAM issue comes from. And actually, speaking of that, after creating those meshes, let's see, we're up to 6 gigs of RAM being used. So yeah, definitely a RAM intensive program. But I do believe we are, what I do here. Okay. I do believe we're basically ready to animate it. And that's where this parameters panel comes in. For the most part, I don't think we need anything else. And so, yeah, so when it comes to animating, these are all your features and everything that can go into it. I do believe some of these may not get translated into face rig very well. Some things like the body X, Y, and Z, I haven't really seen working too well. But I know some things like the breathing animation does get ported over, and so we're gonna see a little bit what goes on. And I personally, I don't know everything about this. You can play around with it, but I don't animate everything in here. Some of these things don't matter too much, and some of these like smiling animations I haven't really messed with. I know there are things like different modes that you can bring your character into. If you've seen some of the more advanced face rigs, you'll see them be able to change their expression entirely, and it's almost like you have a separate rig for each independent emotion or something like that. And I just haven't gone into that, but this is where you're going to be doing all that. And you're basically just going to go through animating. Quick and easy place to find some info is, I do believe it's in parameter settings. Here we go. This is how you know what you're shooting for when it comes to the animation. A lot of it, everything's kind of already blocked out with their minimum and maximum values. But this is where you're going to see what's actually going on. Unfortunately, some of these descriptions are absolutely awful. And it's going to take a little bit of experimentation to realize what the hell some things are. Because, for instance, both angle X and angle Z, the description is causes it to face the right side of the screen. Now, one of these is actually leaning to the left, and one is actually turning to the left, or something like that. And I don't know which one it is. So I'm actually going to open up a previously made one and be like, oh, confirming. Anyway, looking at this, you can see, like, for instance, eye left open. This is to open the left eye. Its minimum value is 0. The default value is 1, and the maximum value is 1, and it causes the eye to open. So from this information, you can see that 0 is closed, 1 is open, and at 1, the eye is fully open. And so you'll see that when you go into eye left open, you can see that this slider goes from 0 to 1. A lot of these default values are already set in place. That's nice. Some things like the angles, they go from -30 to 30. And when it comes to these animations, I'm going to kind of work inwards to outwards as we go. So I'm going to try and get started with some of these eyes. Now, so when we made the frames, we went outwards to inwards. And that's just because as we go out, we're affecting a bunch of things at once. And like some things like the head layer is inside the full body. So we're going outwards to inwards with our warp deformers. And then we're going to go inwards to outwards with the actual animation. But I don't think it matters too much. You could probably go top to bottom or something like that if you want. But I'm just opting to go in this direction with it. So what we're going to do is, let's see. Oh, that's actually one thing that I'm not sure about. Let me see if my eyes are actually mapped the same. So what I'm going to do is, well, for one, I'm going to save. Because I'm terrible about that. Let's go. Where do I want to save this? Where am I putting it? I thought I already had a file. Maybe it's up one more. There we are. My face rig. My filing system is atrocious. So we're gonna call this the one, the Kydex face rig. There we go, Cubism Live 3D model. There we go. And now I've got it. So next thing I'm gonna go is open. Because I do believe, now that I think about it, I think my left and rights may be flip-flopped. I'm not sure if the program's understanding of left and right is the same as or if the program's left and right is from the character's perspective or from the viewer's perspective. So here's the last one that I made. This is Shard's face rig. And you can see I've already done some things. So I've got all these rotations and animations. Like some things kind of didn't work out too well. Like if you look at my angle Z. Okay, so Z is literally the head tilt left and right. And then X is the body rotation left and right. That's a good thing to note. So that's the left open, so yes. So probably something to note is when you're naming everything, when I made Shard, I named everything from the viewer's perspective, not from the character's perspective. And then when I made Kydex, I did it from the character's perspective. Thing to note now, lessons learned, do everything from the viewer's perspective, not the character's perspective. So my left and rights are going to be a little bit flip-flopped. But it's not a big deal. Here's a little bit of an extra animation. This cheek right here. I don't think that actually gets applied anywhere in Face Rig. I haven't gotten it to activate, but maybe it's a feature that I haven't seen just because I haven't messed too much with Face Rig, and I don't know too much about this program. So, just things to note. I don't know exactly how to get that to animate in Face Rig yet. There's my mouth opening. So I'm going to have this open. This might eat a little bit much of my resources trying to have it open. But actually, you know what? I'm just going to write this down real quick. Yeah, paper. There we go. Draw it on a Bodhi plot. Oh. Okay. So I'm going to write this down. Angle X is body rotation. Angle Z is head tilt. And then Y, I believe, is the actual looking up and looking down. I know I added angle Z when I did Ragehound's model, but I didn't do it with the Shard. Shard is definitely, this is my first rig, so definitely some issues that I ran into, but it's good to know some things. And it's nice to have this one to reference real quick. So, I think I've got all the notes that I need for this. Now we're back into Kydex rig. And I think what I do want to do is I'm going to start off with the eyeballs because they're the most excruciating and painful part. And to do that, let's go with the eyelids first so that we can animate those getting out of the way. One thing is if you originally drew it with the eyes closed, you would only have to animate the opening part. If you started it with the open, you would have to animate the closing part. Because I have them in the halfway mark, I have to animate them going in both directions, but it's also saving a little bit in the overall distortion of the image. So that's just kind of a personal decision. We'll see how effective it is ultimately when it's implemented. So we're going for eye left open. And as we saw from that note sheet, again, there, little dashes and parameter settings if you need to see it. But with eye left open, 0 is closed, 1 is open, and it's all, by default, it will be open. And to do this, in this instance, because it is a smooth transition, and you're never going to be sitting in the middle, you only need 2 keyframes. one for the closed and one for the open. And that's where we're going to use this button up here. This is add 2 keyframes. The other thing to note is it's only going to add those keyframes to the layers that you have selected. So because I'm on the left eye and the eye opening and closing is entirely based on the eyelids, we're going to select the deformers for the left upper and left lower eyelids. And this is where I'm totally getting things confused because I named everything backwards. Fantastic. So yeah, lessons learned. So I've got the 2 eyelids on this side selected. We're going to select the eye left open and we're going to add 2 keyframes. Bam, it automatically adds them to the front and back, and you're going to see that nothing's happening in between, but that's totally fine, that's expected. Because we haven't actually animated anything. Now, all you really need to do is move your mouse cursor or drag this dot, or I think you can right click, yep. And it'll automatically move the animation to that dot. And then when it's sitting on that dot, any deformations that you make, it will go to that position. So I'm just going to zoom in just so that I can see both eyes. Just because I do want some of the seams to kind of line up between the two as I animate this. And I'm going to just do them both independently a little bit. And so because we're at this point, at the first point at 0, 0, we're going to be animating it to the closed position. Careful about dragging the very center. Ooh, this is another thing to note. If you see up here this 1, 2, 3, this is your editing level. And this is whether or not you want to animate these individual points versus the Bezier curves versus the object overall. Just something to note. And I'm going to zoom in real quick. And we're just going to animate this. Or I say animate, we're really just dragging some stuff around. Trying to make it look as good as possible. It is going to look kind of disgusting just because you are distorting the final image. But in practice, it's not going to be that big of a deal. A more professional creator would probably make this a little better, but we're just going to do this. And this is also where you're going to notice if you need to add more geometry to that mesh generator. And when we're in that closed state where you want it to be down with a slight downwards bend to it. And as you can see, we're starting to pull it from the eyelid. In shards, I did... Ooh, this is... Okay. Yeah, I want to avoid doing anything extreme like that, so let's kind of pull that up. Let's see what we can do to fix this. Yeah, so there's a little bit of an issue that I'm running into. Is when I made this eyelid, I mashed the line too much. With shards, I made the blue part of the upper part of the eyelid like huge because it all got masked out. When I did Kydex, I didn't do that. So another lesson learned. Definitely draw the eyelids to be beyond the outer rim of the eyelid. So this is going to be a little bit of a kind of a bad artifact. But it's not a huge deal. Just gotta kind of mask it a little bit. Alright. And ultimately, when it's actually in stream level, it's going to be like zoomed out all the way like this, and the eyes aren't going to be closed very often, so it's not too big of a deal. But that is a little bit of an artifact probably want to pay attention to. Let's go back to this right upper eyelid. And yeah, as you can see, this is... Don't want to do that. That is going to annoy the crap out of me. But we'll see how it works in the end. Let's go to the lower part. Let's see. Where is my keyframes? Did I mess up? Oh no. Let's see what's up, because I'm supposed to have some keyframes on this and I don't see them. Did I undo something wrong? Alright, well, it looks like I messed up. Okay. Ha ha ha. Thank you for lots and lots of undos. Alright. Oop. There we go. Got all my eyelids put in there. And let's make sure. Okay, that was the first distortion. Awesome. So we've got our two eyelids. Eye left open. Add two keyframes. To go to this first point, go to the right upper eyelid. And I think probably what I did is I undid a little bit too far. And accidentally deleted my keyframes. So here we go. We're going to kind of work this eye into the closed position while trying to keep everything kind of in the right frame. Yeah, that's not too bad. I could live with that. That's a slightly more straight image. And as I get a little bit better, I'll learn more of how to do this. I may actually eventually start starting it with the drawing with the eyelid straight across and then just distort it to go out of the way. Just because when the eye, you'll see in a minute, when the eye is actually open, you're not going to see it at all. Because it'll pull that eyelid all the way outside of the clipping area. And so what we're going to do is we're going to go down to the bottom layer and we're going to pull it up to kind of match what we've got here. And this is probably an area that I need to practice more than anything. And I think overall that line needs to go down a bit. Realistically, when the eye is closed, the line's going to be more down here. So let me undo a little bit. And we're back on the right upper, and let's just drag these down a bit more. All right, so there are some limitations I'm running into with this. I did mess up a good bit with that eyelid, but I'm not too sure how much I can really compensate for it at this point. That's not too bad though. If it gets thicker evenly, it's not as big of a deal. But the other thing to try and pay attention to is any major deformations. That might be fine. We'll try that. We'll take this lower eyelid. We'll drag it over. Get it to match with the other piece. And I think that's good for the closed. Now what we're going to do is we're going to right click on the open part. It's going to move over to this. And now this part's going to be pretty easy, because all we're really doing is we're trying to get it to evenly distort until it's all the way out of the frame. But you need to keep it even, otherwise the actual opening and closing animation is going to look really weird. So it's going to be a fairly uniform distortion. You don't really have to do everything so evenly or in little baby steps like I am, but I'm just doing that just because. And actually, I'm going to leave it just a little bit down there because that's going to help mask that awkward seam that I created. I'm going to go back to the upper part. Now that's the other thing, is having it still visible does mean you get to see a little bit of that weird distortion as the image goes out of the way. The other thing is when we were creating that texture atlas, making the eyelids in a higher resolution and giving it more space on that texture atlas, that's going to allow for more distortion without it being super obvious. So just something else that you can pay attention to. With this upper eyelid, I'm going to move it all the way out of the way. Just because I like that full open eye look. Kind of like that. That doesn't look too bad. And now let's test and see how it looks. So it looks like this part's animating just a little bit faster than the rest of it. And that's going to be corrected simply by taking this piece and pulling it further on the extreme end. So we're going to go to the right lower, pull it down a little bit more. There we go. And now we are going to see that seam now, but at least the animation should be a little bit smoother. Yeah. And you know what? Let's go all the way with it. Kind of making stuff up as I go. Haha. Cool. Now we've got our eye opening and closing. And the nice thing about that is I can now open it up all the way for when I open or animate the eyes. But I am going to close it all the way for now as I do the left side of things. And where are we? We're looking for eye right open. There we go. We've got our two eyelid layers selected. And we're going to create two keyframes. And for the most part, this side, we're just trying to deform to match the other side. So I think one thing I might try this time is to be a little more universal. And try and do these extreme deformations first. And then do the middle parts to match it. This is where you're also going to spend most of your time trying to get everything to line up. But I think that actually worked out a lot better, because those pretty much match. Doesn't have to be exact, but obviously the closer you can get, the better. That's pretty good. I'm going to go for the lower. And because I can still see a little bit of white here, just because I didn't draw it out all the way, I'm going to try and pull that out to match. And then we're also going to try and make sure that the thickness of this overall closed eye is fairly even. It looks like it is. So there's my closed. Oh, and I totally did it wrong. I have it backwards. But that's not too bad. What I can actually do here is I can go to this lower end, I can delete the key. Let's select both of these. Or actually, let's see with the upper. Yeah, I have it backwards on both. So we're going to select both of these. Click on the lower keyframe. We're going to delete that keyframe. And then we're going to take this one and change it. Oop, don't want to change it like that. We want to adjust. And we're going to go from the original value of 1 to the new value of 0. Okay. And now we've got it fully closed. And then there is no keyframe up here, so it's basically just deleting it immediately after. So if you need a rapidly changing image, you could always do that. What I'm going to do is crank it all the way up to the max, add my keyframe back, and now the eyelid persists throughout the whole thing. We've got this final state, and now we can animate the opening part. The only big downside of this is I have to deal with all the deforms of the closed state before I can get to the open state. But we'll see how this goes. We're actually going to go to mode 3, pull it up and out of the way. Now you can see this grid isn't quite uniform, and that might make things a little bit awkward in the animation, but we'll see how it goes. Alright, so as you can see here, it's not quite going evenly. This part is moving, or the whole thing is moving up at the same rate. What you really want is this middle part to be going slightly faster. And the way you're going to correct that is in the upper part, we're just going to drag all these down till they're just barely outside. Because what it's actually doing is it's over animating that segment. Now it's a little uneven, so we just want to correct it just a little bit like this. Maybe that'll help. Let's see what the other side looks like. Okay, so they look about the same, kind of at that middle part. It's a little bit distorted and a little bit weird, but for the most part, you're not going to see it as you're animating. Or as you're using it in like a live stream or something like that. Go back to our other eyelid. I'm going to go to the lower part. And just because this one wasn't animated so much, it's going to be a lot easier to correct. So we're going to go for these. Oh yeah, because I'm not actually on a keyframe, if you try and distort anything, it's going to pull it to a certain keyframe. So we're going to go right here. And this might actually be the way to do it right there. Stay in that outer area and just bend it down. Let's see how that goes. See if they match. Not too bad. Alright, so there goes the eyelids segment. Next we're going to get the eyeballs moving. So we're going to open up both these eyelids all the way. Because the eyes themselves do not have deform frames, we're going to be selecting their images themselves. And we're going to do the eyeball X, and we're going to be doing eyeball Y at the same time. Now, what you're actually going to have to do is create an individual keyframe for each position. And what I'm actually going to do, because you want that neutral, straightforward look, I'm going to actually create 3 keyframes for each of these. And what that's going to do is it's going to lock in this center position. Now, ultimately, if you were really, really good at estimating, maybe not even then, you could just create the two and have the one center one be looking straight forward. But just to confirm that I do maintain this exact stance when my eyes are straight forward, I'm creating 3 keyframes. The other thing I'm going to do is, because we have to create keyframes for when you're looking up and over or something like that, what I'm going to do is I'm going to hit this little link button and it's going to lock the two together. And so now I can move this grid to move both variables at the same time. What that's going to do is, in the center, I can have my eyes looking straight forward. If I right click the keyframe at the bottom, this is when I'm looking straight down. So we're going to, I'm curious if there is any kind of, okay, there is a little bit. If you hold shift, you can do a little bit of a lock. But that's going to get me to look down. Right click the up position. And we're going to move our eyes up. We go over. And now this is where things are going to be a little bit interesting, because you're going to do these slightly independently. Because one eye is going to go a little bit further than the other. Just like that. And then we're going to go the other way and do the same thing. Oop. All right, let me see how they compare. All the way over, just barely seeing any of the yellow on that eye. Kind of the same thing on this side. Just right on the edge. And just right on the edge. Okay, so that's a pretty decent horizontal movement. Now the thing is, now we actually have to add the keyframes in these corners also. That's not a big deal. Just gonna right click. And this is also where you don't want too many things being affected at the same time, because you have to create keyframes for every possible combination. That's also one reason we want those deformers, is they allow you to animate some things like the overall head without having to add individual keyframes to each eye as you're moving the head. So we're going to go back to selecting our eyeballs, and we're trying to do the up and over. And we're going to go just like that. Move this one just a touch more. And I think that might be a little too far. Go like that. Do the same thing for this other side. Oop. There we go. How's that looking? Nice, semi-interesting rotation. Now maybe you really do want to have these eyes totally connected to each other. Having the other eye moved slightly more does make them look a little bit off, but that might just be my lack of experience in animation. I definitely am making this up as I go along. But I am shooting to kind of have it a little bit more I don't know what I'm thinking. Anyway, now we've got all our eyes and eye positions set up. Now we can actually move our cursor through all this, and we can actually see our eyes moving at these extremes. We've got the eyes in their various positions, and I am just now realizing how awkward that is to have them moving differently. So I don't know. I don't know if I want to redo it. Yeah, I'm going to redo all this. Undo. Oop, shoot, that's way too far. All right, so here we go. We've got a keyframe on the eyeball x-axis, and then we're going to create another 3 keyframes for these 2 eyes. Let me just make sure I have them selected. Got these 2 eyes, and then we're going to create another 3 keyframes. And what we're actually going to do is, because they're both being animated together, and there's things such as combinations, such as up, left, and whatnot, we're going to hit this little link over to the side, and that lets us use this 2D graph to display the movement of both of them simultaneously. And then right now, each of these keyframes are all locked into being in this dead center straight ahead look. So what we can do is we've got it dead center right now, so we can go over to the side. We can move them. Cool. Go to the other side. Cool. Then we're going to go up. And lastly, down. There we go. Now we've got slight jittering, but obviously upper left is still that dead center pose. So we're going to do one of those. One of those. Let me make sure that these are matching. They're pretty close. Okay. Well, yeah, I think it's all right. Okay, now we've got down. And let's get this down and over. And then the other down and over. There we go. Now we've got this nice 2D area. And I guess now that I think about it, I tried animating both eyes individually and having them vary their spacing, but that ended up looking fairly unnatural. So I think one thing you could actually do is in the drawing phase, you could do both eyes on the same layer if you wanted to. Just something to note for future reference. That concludes part 4 of the face rig animation rigging tutorial. Carry on to part 5 as a direct continuation of this video. So see you there.